you can create margin in your schedule and your work week, then all of a sudden you have this time to dream of what's next. It's impossible to dream of what's next when there's a program happening in 2 hours and you still have no idea what you're doing. You've got to create space for yourself to be able to enter into those spaces. Are you settling for the status quo in your youth ministry? Well, don't. Today we are going to talk about what is next for you in your youth ministry.
This is the Ministry Coach Podcast, where we bring you weekly tips and tactics to help you fast track the growth and, more importantly, the health of your youth ministry. My name is Jeff Lascola, and this is
Kristen Lascola. And today we are talking all about how to move past the status quo in your youth ministry and ask yourself, what is next? Because I think stagnation is a very common problem in churches and youth ministries. And we're going to ask ourselves some questions today of how we can make sure that we're always, as Andy Stanley would say, always look for ways to get better. He always says you might be good, but could it be better? If it's better, could it continue to move into the future? Just stagnation is kind of an enemy of thriving ministries. And then you sort of look around one day and are like, what happened? We used to have you ever heard of that church or that youth group that used to be the place to be? And it was exciting and vibrant and healthy. And then over the years, it's just kind of like nothing happened.
right. Exactly.
Nothing happened, So meaning like maybe nothing terrible happened and there was some big moral failure or church split or something crazy. But over time, if nothing happens like fresh and new and it's that analogy we used a couple weeks ago about a house. It's like, okay, you built it, but it doesn't mean you just wind it up and let it go. It takes constant maintenance and improvement. And what can we do here and remodeling and redecorating? And so that's a good way to look at your ministry. So how can we make sure we're moving toward our best constantly? And that's what we're going to talk about today. So what is our next hill to climb? Number one, the only way you can do this is if you have margin. Early on in youth ministry, I made the mistake of getting everything that was urgent done, and I had no time or energy for anything future thinking or important or creative. It was just, did I get the game planned? Whew, just barely. Did I get the message done? Whew, just barely. Did we pull off this event? Yeah, just barely.
Right.
And it was always kind of this like one step behind, then getting through just in the nick of time kind of thing. Well, when you're running a ministry like that, you only have the mental capacity for just getting day-to-day operations done. But if you can create margin in your schedule and your work week, then all of a sudden you have this time to dream of what's next. It's impossible to dream of what's next when there's a program happening in 2 hours and you still have no idea what you're doing.
Right.
So how do you create margin? Well, my favorite way, which I've talked about before, is bulk planning and planning ahead. So basically I figure, okay, I need 6 months worth of games. And then I can repeat those 6 months worth of games. We can play the same game twice, for a Sunday or weekend service, the same game twice a year for our Tuesday nights. And then I just fill my calendar with that. I planned ahead. I know what game we're playing 8 weeks from now.
Right.
And I don't have to spend mental energy. Whereas before it'd be 3:00 on a Tuesday, the night of my program. And I'd be like, what do you guys want to do? What should we do? No, what do we do? So when you already know what you're going to do, then you create this time of like, hey, the planning, the urgent is done. Could we move into a sphere that is more creative or dreaming of what could be or what's next? You've got to create space for yourself to be able to enter into those spaces. But urgent will always take the place of important.
Yeah.
And it's so important that we have time to dream. So you've got to take care of your urgent stuff ahead of time. So like I said, I like to bulk plan. I like to plan ahead so that I don't have to spend time on those things.
Yeah. It's kind of the sprint mentality instead of what you should have is more of like a marathon mentality, where if you're constantly sprinting from here to there and then from there to there, like keep on these bursts of energy that you're expelling, instead of kind of like going with the long view in mind of where you can kind of get ahead a little bit, and you're a couple laps ahead now, so you can kind of slow down a little bit, or maybe even stop and get a glass of water or something. But if you're constantly doing those sprint, it's just going to kill yourself and lead to burnout really quick.
Right. And it's not very inspiring to just take care of day-to-day operations. It's a little bit of a hamster wheel, and it's not like a inspiring place to be mentally or emotionally. It just feels like you're constantly under the gun.
Barely got things done. Now you got to sprint to the next thing.
So whatever it takes for you, and we'll talk more about this in a little bit, but you've got to get out from the under the gun mentality. Nobody can breathe there. Nobody can be creative there. Nobody can dream or be their best there. So that's sort of the foundation for this type of work and this kind of headspace is you've got to be in a space of margin, knowing all the urgent is taken care of, so you don't have to waste time there. So once your program pillars are healthy and thriving, then you can ask yourself, is there a way to make these things better? And what I mean by ministry pillars is if you're in like a launching phase, like, hey, we need to launch student leadership or a small group ministry, or we need our adult leader culture. We don't even have any adult leaders. We don't even have worship. So those are kind of like the pillars of this ministry. And then you can go through and say, okay, are these running efficiently? Like, where could this be better? So for example, could something be more efficient? Maybe you haven't quite figured out your communication style yet, and you need to figure out a way for everyone to be on the same page, or have a schedule for yourself of I communicate everything on Monday and get it out. I prep my communication on Thursday. This is speaking from experience. This is what I do. I prep all my communication on Thursday, and then I have my weekend, and then send out all my communication on Monday. It's an efficient system. Everyone knows when to expect communication. It's not like a hodgepodge throughout the week. Maybe I should send out a little email reminding them about this. Oh, maybe I should do that. It's like, nope. Here's the efficiency of the communication. Maybe you need to ask yourself, are we meeting our goals well? Meaning, if your goals in ministry are evangelism or outreach or discipleship or serving, like if you were to sit down and think, what does our ministry want to be known for? Then you've got to ask, are we meeting those goals? Like, we want to create students who discover their gifts and are able to use them. Okay, that is a really good goal. Is there a vehicle within your ministry that is making that happen? We want to create, our mission statement at North Coast Church is to create disciples in a healthy church environment. Well, then we've got to look at, what's the best vehicle for discipleship? Our church says life groups, a small group ministry. So then we pour a lot of our energy and time and announcements and all that and resources into life groups, because that is creating disciples. And so you kind of work backwards of, okay, what are we doing? We want to be known as a missional church. Okay, how are people having opportunities? Do they know where to find, if they want to partner with a local missionary, could they even find that information?
Right.
That's a conversation I had this weekend. This sweet 19-year-old girl's like, I want to go on a missions trip. Like, how do I do that here? I'm like, yeah, we need to make sure everybody knows.
Right.
So just making sure, are our goals clear, and does everyone know how those are getting met? Maybe you're wanting to know, how do we reach more people? Maybe you have a really great program, but it's just hard getting the word out because you're new or whatever. That might be where you need to put your brain power. Maybe things need to be more organized and clearer. Maybe people are a little bit confused of your ministry and how to get a hold of you, and what I want to come to your events, but I can't seem to find any information on them. So these are all things, these are just examples. Maybe you look at your culture and you're like, man, we have a lot of fun, but are we God honoring? So these are things that, like I said, now you're sitting in a margin where you can, like, all right, discipleship, like these are so much bigger questions than what game are we playing on Tuesday? So take care. Do we need games? Trust me. Yes. You know me. I love a game. But once we can check those off, now we can move into a bigger space where we're asking something deeper and more profound to make sure that our ministry is not just these nuts and bolts of like, I did the announcements and then I did a game and then I did message, but really, are we moving in the correct direction?
Yeah.
Are we clear, organized, God honoring, missional, whatever? Are we on track? Are we on task? And then ask yourself, where do we need to go next? Where are we and where do I see us going? What is the goal on the horizon? Just that plug and play mentality each week. Like I said, you can sort of get on that hamster wheel, but ask yourself and your team, what's new, what's exciting, what's dynamic, what is breathing new life into this ministry? Because I will say, I feel like ministries are almost a living, breathing entity. Like they are not just stagnant like programs, but they have an energy to them. They have like a buzz to them. And, is there something in your ministry right now that people are excited about, and that could take the forms of a lot of things. Talk to the people in your ministry and ask their advice. Like, where do we need to go next? What are you excited about right now? Make sure you're getting other vantage points than just yours, because the people who work alongside you have a really great vantage point from where they sit, and they might see things totally differently than you. I went on a walk with one of my leaders 2 weeks ago, and she had this brilliant idea that was so simple, but she's like, we really want kids to bring their Bibles to youth group, but it's so hard because we're running around the whole time. They don't know where to put their Bible. And I always lock the small group rooms because I don't want kids just wandering into classrooms doing who knows what. So she's like, they stopped bringing their Bibles, and that's such a shame. I said, I agree. I don't know what to do. And because we have so many kids, it's like, do they just throw their Bible on the floor? Like, that's not going to work. So she's like, hey, I was thinking, what if we got bins for each small group and labeled them like Heidi and Arden's small group? And then it's like near the information table. And if the kid sees their small group bin, they just put their Bible in there. And then the small group leader takes that bin to small groups, during that time. I'm like, oh, that's such a good idea. And then she was going on, she had this idea of like, and then maybe, if they bring their Bible, they get these bucks. And she had this whole system for how they could earn money toward camps and events by memorizing scripture and doing Bible studies. And, like, she's like, we have so many kids who would just thrive in that. And then they get paid these chaos bucks. And then those account for real money, and then they can either use it at the snack shack or put it towards
Snack Shack.
What did I say?
You said Snack Shack. I'm confirming that's where it will go.
I know. She's like,
there's
some
no
of
other
them
option.
will just be like, heck yeah, I memorized the verse, I'm buying something.
You had me at snacks.
But she's like, or they could turn it in for camp scholarship funds. And she's like, I'm willing to get this off the ground. I think it's a really good idea. It's like, that's brilliant. That's great. So many good things just in that one walk of like, you've been a leader for a long time. What do you think we need? And so make sure you're talking to people, get outside of your own head, your own self-talk, and see if you were running this place, what would you do? What would you say? We need everyone's voice. We need everyone's ideas.
Number one, I'd get rid of computers. Right off the bat, boom. And that's about as far as I'd go.
Computers?
Why not?
That is weird.
Okay, fine. You lead. Go ahead.
Oh, were you trying to give me a bad idea to see how I would respond? Like, wow, Jeff, thank you for your input.
Wasn't a bad idea.
But also, we need them. Ha, ha, ha.
Whatever.
So
you do you. Go ahead.
Some ideas that have kind of like breathed life into our ministry have been little things. And this, again, only works if your ministry is already healthy.
Yeah.
Like, you can't just slap a Band-Aid on it and be like, we got new shirts. Just forget that your small group leaders never show up or that you're getting bullied at our youth group. Like, so if it's unhealthy, this stuff doesn't work. But like, we have a brand new class coming in, and my guys director, Caleb, had a great idea. He's like, let's kind of pair their entrance into our ministry with a new merch drop. And he designed this really sweet shirt, and the kids are so excited because they're so excited for the ministry and they want to be a part of it. They want a shirt. And it's like this bonding experience, like, you got a shirt, you got a shirt. What's that shirt? And it created a little thing. So that kind of breathed new life. Sprinkling competition series throughout the year has really breathed life into our ministry too, because it's bonding.
Yeah.
Like being on a team with someone, those of you who played or play sports, being on a team with someone, having a victory and a defeat with each other really just bonds you relationally. You're creating memories and you're cheering each other on. There's a lot of good that comes from team competition. So I do a small group team competition where the small groups compete against each other. We do a boys versus girls competition. That's what we're doing right now as our new class transitions up. And then we do a big competition in the fall called the Battle. We've talked about that before, but throughout the year, it's youth group, but it's more intense, or it's fun, or it's like there's a prize on the line, and we just change it up. And then another thing that breathes life into our ministry is small group night out, where the small groups, instead of coming to a youth group, they plan their own fun thing. And I've just seen a lot of bonding through that, and people kind of come out of the woodwork, like people that don't come to youth group, but if they're on that list and they get an invite, they're like, I'll try it out.
Yeah.
And it brings people that I haven't seen in a really long time. We'll go hang out with a small group. So make sure you're having little things that breathe life into your group. There needs to be, I guess, a movement against predictability always, but that there's always, I don't know how you guys feel, but in my own personal life, I feel like I always need something to be looking forward to. If I look ahead and I'm like, I'm on a hamster wheel doing the same thing for the foreseeable future, it's just so demoralizing, I guess. And so I love planning little fun things like, okay, bike ride with a friend on this day, or coffee with a friend on that day. And just make sure I at least have one thing on my calendar that I'm excited about, instead of Monday is the day I do this, Tuesday is the day I do this. I think our youth groups kind of function the same way as let me guess, then we're doing this and then that, and so it's keep it fresh, keep it exciting, give them something to look forward to. And again, this stuff sometimes I think from the outside can appear gimmicky and be like, oh, well, it's God's word alone that should bring them in. But again, I've said this so many times. Yes, that's the whole point. God's word is the whole entire point of why we're doing this. If God's word wasn't a part of this, I wouldn't be having this podcast. Right. I would not care about doing.
You wouldn't have a job.
True. But it was just we're doing all this to point them there.
Yeah.
And meeting a human need of adolescence, human nature. And I see us.
You can go back, sorry, not to cut you off, but you can go back to the feeding of the 5,000. Because he could have said, hey, it's all about just my word. I'm not going to feed you anything. Listen up, people. But Good it's point. He fed their need.
I think what you're trying to say, and I'm picking it up, is Jesus treated humans like humans.
Right.
And I think that is one of the beautiful things about youth ministry is it's this canvas, or it's almost this bottomless pit of possibilities of how we can creatively point people to the gospel by treating them as humans.
Yeah.
Pulling out the stops for them, showing them kindness, and showing them family and community and fun and connectivity and relatability, and designing a ministry that meets a human where they're at.
Right.
Because you're right. That is what Jesus did. And the truth is, I've heard people complain about churches they serve coffee and donuts.
How dare you make it fun?
And they're just trying to entice people.
Make those seats uncomfortable.
Whoa,
standing room only.
So I think there's another side of that coin where we can think of ourselves as well, I'm hardcore because it's we don't do any frills.
Sucked all the fun out of it.
Yeah. So don't get too prideful on that one way or another. I think ministry and pride really do go hand in hand. And so we have to be careful that we're not saying, well, we're extra holy because we got rid of our stage lights.
Right.
And we went acoustic, and but it's oh, well, we're just having fun. There has to be the purpose of the fun. The purpose of it all comes back to Jesus. So, one thing, a practical takeaway too, would be, I used to do this early on in ministry. We're kind of required to, not that we had to turn it in, but just for like a learning experience is a time audit. So if you constantly feel under the gun and you feel like you just can't get ahead and you're always scrambling, do a time audit. See where your time is going. What are you spending too much time doing? And the things that you're spending a lot of time on, do they need it?
Right.
Does it need to be, do you need to be on the phone for 3 hours a day? Do you need to be designing a cool graphic for 2 hours a day? Do you need to be making an awesome flyer? Like, what are you doing that is taking all your time? And try to adjust from there so that you can give yourself that margin.
Yeah. I've heard sometimes when you do that time audit, some of the things that you need to look for is what can be automated. Like what are things that you're, I don't say wasting your time, but spending too much of your time doing that can be put into a system where they can be automated. What can be delegated? What's something that you can pass off to other people around you? And it's not sort of like, these are the like tasks that nobody wants to do, so here you do them. But just what are things that you can share, you know, with the leadership of your staff or your volunteers, or if you have interns, things like that, you can pass along to them, and then kind of like filter down what is the priority of maybe some of the things that you really should be looking at, and not just sacrificing all your time to some of these other things. So it's just sort of a way of, I think, of looking at that. And if you guys want to check out the episode we did this a while back, but it's kind of how to gain more time in your week. We'll put that in the description below. And then we also had an episode, you had touched on it, about how to do a year's worth of games in under 30 minutes, which I'm sure a lot of you could use that time back. So make sure you guys check out both of those episodes. Right now, we're gonna do the question of the day, and I'm gonna pose this to you. What is something that you are looking forward to in your ministry? And those of you watching and listening, if you're on YouTube, put in the comment section below, what is something coming up in your youth ministry that you're really looking forward to?
I'm currently in a week and a half, we're having a leader volleyball night. And we're very competitive and love to play volleyball because we're getting ready. So our summer camp is whitewater rafting. And when we're there at the river, we do a night where my leaders play a volleyball tournament versus the river guides. And we are currently up 3 years in a row. We have won. And so
this is kind of practice.
It is. Then. So we're going to practice on a Sunday coming up and have dessert and snacks, get our game on. And then I'm excited to actually play the game against the river guides come July when we're there. I got the point match last year.
Oh, look at you.
Look at moi. And then they do like a victory swim when they win. I don't, but I'm like, yay, go. And it's just so fun. It's just so competitive.
That's cool. Okay, we'll put down in the comment section below what is something that you're looking forward to in your youth ministry. Right now, we're going to do a community comment of the day, and this comes from, I am going to butcher your name, and I apologize in advance, but Ekaterina Sergeyeva, that was
very good.
It sounds like I know what I'm saying, but I could have been way off.
I believe it.
Okay, she writes, I so love the interaction of you two, the light banter, the constant connection and support. It's a joy to watch. You're really setting a great example.
Oh, well, that's a very sweet comment.
It is very sweet. We really appreciate that. We thank you so much for watching and listening, and we will see you next time.
Are you settling for the status quo in your youth ministry? Well, don't. Today, we're going to talk about how to move from what am I talking about?
We really appreciate.
We really appreciate it.
Thank you. We.
Because it includes a lot. So.
Well, throat popper.